Kurt Schwitters arrived in Ambleside in 1945, and as a German refugee, he initially felt out of place in the small rural village. However, he made firm friends in the 2.5 years he lived here, and forged connections through his art. Let's take a closer look at Kurt Schwitters' portraits. Dr. George Ainsley Johnston practiced medicine in Ambleside for over 50 years. He was one of the original members of the Armitt Library at its inception in 1912, and a founder of the Ambleside Old Folks' Do, or the AOF, to whom this portrait was originally given. And the portrait was offered to and accepted by the Armitt Trust in 1952. The portrait shows Dr. Johnston, an older man with grey hair and a neat beard and spectacles, wearing a three-piece suit. He is midway through a game of chess, looking down at the board in deep concentration. Schwitters had a long history of illness, and during his time in Ambleside, his health rapidly declined. In late January 1946, Johnston tended Schwitters through a bout of influenza, which was quickly followed in February by a brain hemorrhage. Throughout his recovery, Johnston visited regularly, playing chess with him for an hour or so each day, giving Edith Thomas, Kurt Schwitters' partner, a chance to get some fresh air, while at the same time enabling the two men to establish a strong friendship. Schwitters painted the portrait, one of the best known of his Ambleside works, in gratitude for Johnston having saved his life. In a letter to a friend about Dr. Johnston's portrait, Schwitters wrote,
"I don't know whether to let him win, then he has a friendly expression, but people will think I'm a bad chess player. Or shall I win, then his expression will be unfriendly, and people will think I am a bad painter."
William Pearce is the grandson of Harry and Ida Pearce, and the nephew of Bill Pearce, all three of whom were painted by Kurt Schwitters while living in Elterwater in the late 1940s. We asked William how he feels about the paintings of his family.
Well, Harry Pearce, my grandfather, who I remember most, he died early 60s when I was a young lad at school. Well, he was a very sort of learned man, a countryman who lived at this farm in Cylinders. He was a patron of the arts, and he was in the local Conservative Party. He was chairman of them. He gave fetes for local communities in Cylinders. He was a sort of well-known figure up in Langdale at that time. But of course, I only saw him rarely once a year when my family moved up for a holiday. But I have lovely memories of him as a dear old man with his dogs, chickens on the farm, in his little cottage, smoking his cigarettes and the ash dropping onto his waistcoat. And as children, we used to watch in amazement as the ash got longer and longer. Bill Pearce, who was my uncle, I unfortunately never met. He was killed in a motorcycle accident in 1948. And likewise, Ida Pearce, my grandmother, who died in I think it was 1949. I don't remember her, only from what my mother told me, that she was a dear lady, very hospitable. Whenever we were up there, she really looked after my mother and family. Well, as far as I remember, the likeness of Harry Pearce, my grandfather, is very good. He seems to have captured him in a lovely way. I remember him exactly, even in the suit he was wearing. I can remember that waistcoated suit and how he looked. Yeah, no, it's a lovely portrait.
Charles Simpson owned the family grocer's business in the Ambleside Market Hall, where Schwitters and his partner Edith Thomas registered their ration books. They became friends by playing chess on Thursday afternoons, after the grocer's shop closed early. The portrait shows Charles in 1946 as a middle-aged man in a dark three-piece suit, sat in front of the fireplace in the Smithy Brow cottage, where the Simpsons lived. He has grey hair, dark eyes, and a neat moustache, and he looks directly at the viewer. Like Dr. Johnston, Charles Simpson was well known in Ambleside. His friendship with Schwitters made the artist more visible to residents and visitors, so he could secure future portrait commissions. Doris Turner, Simpson's daughter, said her father bought the painting from Kurt Schwitters for £40 and that he was thrilled to bits with it. Charles's great-granddaughter has said that, as far as I am concerned, my great-granddad is back home in Ambleside, where he is looked after and people can go see him. Conrad Slater was 10 years old when he and his mother Nora were painted by Kurt Schwitters in 1945. We asked Conrad how he feels about the paintings today and what he remembers about being painted by Kurt Schwitters.
Well, it's an interesting story. We were guests in a hotel, the Wild Boar near Crook. One particular year when we went, sort of got round amongst the guests that you could get your portrait taken by Schwitters. In fact, the owner of the hotel donated Schwitters a single room, for him to paint the guests. So it's in a single bedroom, not very far away from mine actually. Well, I got interviewed in there. Well, I found his accent a bit difficult to understand, so we didn't sort of talk much between ourselves. My mother was in the bedroom with me. It just seemed like an ordinary guy. Ah, yes. Well, now, I was disappointed. I hadn't had any experience of portraits in thick oil paint, so for a start, I felt he wasn't sort of smoothing his paint out properly, and I was expecting something looking like a picture postcard, you see. Ah, yes. Well, now my parents were very pleased with what they'd done. Actually, she cottoned on that then she could get the painting changed a little bit. So she actually had it painted at home in the lounge, and she said, "Well, look, can I have the back of the settee lowered? You see." So she had that amended, and you can hardly tell on the painting that it was different. And also, the dress that she was wearing was coloured, and the dress that's on the portrait was more white. Oh, right, rather nice actually. When I mentioned it to my parents, they said, "Oh, yes, well now artists, go through a special training and they can sometimes see things that you and I can't see." So I was sort of satisfied with that.
Despite suffering great hardship after fleeing the Nazi regime in Germany in 1937, Kurt Schwitters was a lifelong creative who never stopped painting, sculpting, and collaging. He left a lasting impression on Ambleside and its people, making many friends in the 2.5 years he spent in the Lake District.